Testing 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Emergency and Community Services Committee meeting for December the 7th. I believe the last one of this year. I would like to call the meeting to order. Please switch all electronic devices to a non-audible function during this meeting. Councillors, please ensure that you are logged in to eScribe to access the votes and the speakers list. Please note that the quorum is now present. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Through the chair, there are no changes to today's agenda.
Thank you very much. Amazing. Hold that thought. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Nan. All those in favor, please.
Vote is open.
Thank you.
Almost there. I got there.
And that vote carried unanimously, 6-0. Are there any declarations of interest this afternoon? Seeing none. The approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of November 16th, 2023. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of that previous meeting? Moved by Councillor Maureen Wilson, seconded by Councillor Kretsch. Is there any discussion on the approval of the minutes? Seeing none, we'll go straight to the vote, please.
Vote is up.
Thank you. And that vote carried unanimously again. We are now moving into our consent items. The ambulance dispatch information update, HSC 23045 citywide. Are there any questions regarding this item? Councillor Kretsch, please.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to ask you this, Chief Sanderson, so you can tell me no. But I wonder about applications for the PSAP system with respect to dispatch. I know that there was some discussion about, I thought, oh, I'm thinking of something else. I apologize. You know what? That's my own brain misfiring. I was thinking about paramedics, not about fire. I have no questions at this time. Thank you for being here and thank you for your report, Chief Sanderson.
He's our ambulance chief. Okay.
Yeah.
It has been a busy day, so it's okay for our brains to make a, I did it this morning 2 or 3 times. Any further questions on the item? Seeing none, may I have a motion to receive the item? Moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Esther Pauls. And we'll call that vote now, please.
Through the chair, as Councillor Pauls is attending the meeting today but cannot vote, therefore cannot move.
Hi, Councillor Pauls. Thank you for attending today.
Yes, I'm a
This
guest.
is why I'm leaving the chair at the end of this meeting.
I would like to help you vote, but I can't.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wang? Yes. Thank you very much. Now we can have that vote. And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Item number 9.2 is the accessibility of city-operated recreational facilities, HSC 23055A citywide. Are there any questions regarding this item? Councillor Nan, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you to staff for this information update. It was really interesting to see, especially with some of our older facilities, recreation facilities in the lower city. If I read it correctly in the report, these facilities and the comprehensive review that recreation is going under in terms of the master plan will be approved in 2024. My question through you to staff is, in terms of the, was it 17 million plus of capital investments we need to make these facilities accessible. Where is that projected to fall in our budget deliberations?
Steve?
Thank you. Through the chair, Steve Savor, Acting Director of Recreation. Thanks for the question, Councillor. In terms of the cost estimates that you see before you, they are unfunded at this point. So in terms of getting approval in the following years, it would have to go through the capital budget process, but at this current time, they are unfunded.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Are the items that have been identified, are they enabling us to be AODA compliant by 2025?
Thank you, Councillor. Steve?
Through the chair, these items that have been identified were sourced through a previous AODA report commissioned by Public Works staff. In terms of getting a compliance of this, the items that you see here really represent the benchmark, the minimum benchmark parameters that we need for these facilities. So in terms of moving forward, we need to achieve these benchmarks to be AODA compliant by 2025.
Thank you. And then through you, Chair. So just want to make sure I understand this crystal clear. In order for us to be AODA compliant to benchmarks for the facilities on this list in Appendix A, we need to make a 17 million plus investment, and it's currently unallocated in any budget year. I guess my query then is, if we need to be compliant by 2025, does this not need to be part of the 2024 budget?
Good question. Steve?
Through the chair, and I have colleagues from Public Works that are online that can speak to that, but in terms of the minimum benchmarks, and so as you can see in Appendix A in the report, really speak to the minimum pieces in terms of these aspects. So some of these facilities do have met some of those minimum benchmarks. However, some of them have not. So in terms of answering your question, yes, there will be a need and a pressure to achieve those, but I can pass that along to our colleagues from Public Works to support that are online.
I can't see anyone online yet for Public Works, so if you're there, can you just turn your camera on and your mic? There you are.
Robin Ellis, Manager of Strategic Planning, Capital and Compliance. I think Steve Savor, Director in Recreation, has correctly identified that there is a funding gap. What our strategy normally is to look at a couple of different angles. One of them is a customer service angle. And so from a customer service standard, we do meet AODA. We've worked really hard to get there. And then from a facility standpoint, when we go to renovate any facility, and we do invest in our facilities, at that point we look at a number of things, including modern accessibility code, which of course improves from code to code in the Ontario Building Code, and we bring it up to modern Ontario Building Code, which is the best standard we currently have available in terms of the built environment, where possible. There are certain instances within a building where hallway widths and things along those lines can't be addressed through every renovation, but to the best of our ability, when we invest capital dollars in a facility, we always roll in the accessibility component and make sure that that aspect is covered off entirely. And also, so that the public can see the value of the investment, that it's not only to preserve the infrastructure, but also to make it more accessible for the public. But I'm not sure if that answers your question, Councillor, if I could.
That's helpful information through you, Chair. But I'm just looking for really clear, really clear. Is the 17 million plus that's identified in Appendix A a capital pressure that we need to consider in the 2024 budget in order to enable our facilities to be AODA compliant by 2025, assuming that the work needs to be tendered or brought in line in 2024 in order for us to hit the 2025 compliance date?
Robin?
So my understanding is that no, we haven't submitted that as a capital pressure to hit that compliance date. Buildings are, Ontario Building Code is met to the date that a building is constructed.
Chair, I'm gonna pause there with my questions because I think I'm not understanding the responses in terms of our requirements for compliance and vis-a-vis Appendix A and what that means in terms of our budget pressures as it relates to facilities capital. I'll wait to hear from the rest of my colleagues.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kretsch, you're up next, please.
I'm going to go down a similar road, but then a different road when it comes to B. I'm the one who I think asked for this report. If I recall, 30% of the assets here on this list are in Ward 2 from Appendix A. And my question is similar to Councillor Nan's, really about, like I understand that what we've done is we've based this on a 2016 report that I see here, an accessibility audit project report, PW 18064. I understand that. What I don't understand is, in the plainest way possible, what our obligations are for these facilities with respect to our obligations for them to be AODA compliant, and when those timelines are. I also don't understand how the minimum accessibility benchmarks apply to the individual institutions. So I was hoping there'd be a column here saying, okay, for the Eastwood Arena, we meet 1, 2, 6, and 7. We're missing 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9. Like I don't know how to assess that. So I'm asking on the fly, I suppose, and maybe it's unfair, maybe it's better to come back with a more detailed report, but how can I look at this and understand where we're falling behind and where we have to catch up, and then where we're going to fund that from? Because it looks like when I read it that we have $18 million of things to catch up on, and I don't see a place where this is going to be funded.
Thank you, Councillor. Robin, please.
Thank you through the chair. Robin Ellis, Manager of Strategic Planning, Capital and Compliance. You're correct. There is a gap in terms of where this can be funded from. In terms of the city's obligations, there are a couple of levels of obligations. One of them is on from a building code perspective, another is from an AODA perspective, and another one is from a, essentially human rights perspective. So there are layers within each one of those. From an AODA perspective, we are compliant in terms of how we service our clients. And a lot of it has to do with customer service standards and the built environment. From an Ontario Building Code perspective, we are compliant. Buildings are held to the standard in the year in which they were built or renovated. And as I mentioned, whenever we do a major renovation, we do upgrade the facilities. I think the only potential gap could be from a human rights perspective, because from that perspective, it is based on an individual's accommodation within the facility. So this is why this continues to be incredibly important work, that we continue to do the work on the facilities to bring them up to the very best standard that's available, which is the current Ontario Building Code. And this work is important, and if the funding is available, it absolutely should be allocated. And when investments are made into facilities, we absolutely need to do the accessibility upgrades. And there is a bit of a gap there. But I believe my understanding is that gap falls from a human rights perspective.
Councillor?
That's helpful. And I will use an example. I think it may be helpful, but I really think that what you're suggesting here is if the funding is available, and that's not really up to us to determine on the fly. There's not sort of a pot we can reach to by saying, oh, the funding's available here. It has to come through the budget process. So my question to you, and I guess to whomever from Public Works wants to speak to this, when is this going to be a priority that's going to be brought forward through the budget from staff? Because that's how it has to happen, right? Like, I think, and we're recognizing that we have a gap here. When I think of the Bonetto Recreation Center, which I'm going to be hopefully putting a motion forward to assist with some of the modifications there, right? Technically speaking, the theater auditorium there is not used for customers. Like, there's a real way to articulate all this stuff, and I get that we can technically say we're meeting our obligations because that doesn't fall into that specific subcategory of customer service delivery and so forth and so on, but we have an auditorium that's inaccessible to people with disabilities, and it's the only one in the North End and so on. So you're right about the human rights gap. So my question to you is, when will we see these coming forward, and what's the plan with respect to them coming to the budget? If you don't have an answer today, that's fine, but I just wanted to get a sense if you had it.
Robin?
Through the chair, to the counselor, thank you for the question. I think that's a really important point. It is embedded in all of the major renovation projects. So that is one piece. Any major renovation of a rec center that you see outlined in the 10-year capital plan, and there are a number of them, or any other facility for that matter, accessibility will be included within those. That having been said, in terms of hitting some of the other facilities, if there's an appetite for it, we do have an unfunded, category. And, if there's an appetite for it, staff can bring that forward as part of the budget process, and are happy to do that in any year, whether it be 2024 or 2025. I'd be checking with my colleagues in finance to see if it's too late to get it into the 2024, but I'm certainly happy to work with finance and make that a priority to put that in so that it can be a consideration that's available, within the prioritization. Hopefully that answers.
You have 2 minutes, 45 seconds.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's really up to staff to decide when they think that should be brought forward in terms of priorities. Obviously, these things matter and human rights matter, so I don't need to really underscore that point. I do think it's worth considering bringing forward something to identify exactly when we're going to see this in the budget. And I'll leave that for the moment. Just to highlight this point, every single one of the items here is in the lower city from wards 1 through 4. Wards 1 through 4 have the highest proportion of folks who don't necessarily have access to these kinds of things. Also across the city where we see most folks with disabilities. So I really want to just focus on the fact that this is a huge inequity, and we need to prioritize this as a city. I'm not going to suggest an answer to that question in this moment. On Appendix B, what I want to understand about Appendix B is, because this is something I'm very interested in, when I look at the Civic Partner Facility Review and I see the 10-ish groups that are here, what I don't get from this, though, is where we can actually access these as a municipality at no cost or low cost, or what the cost is. The whole purpose of me putting this forward was to talk about access. Because right now, we have a very small discretionary part of our budget to spend on engagement, and I spend as much as I can on that. One of the biggest barriers for us really doing excellent engagement is the cost to book facilities, because there aren't enough quality public facilities that are accessible in the core, which I think Appendix A makes quite clear in some ways. So how do we get more information here, and how do we identify where there are agreements? Like, as an example, the city of Hamilton contributed almost $1 million to Bridgeworks, and we're having to pay, up to $900 to use this thing. We contributed $25 million to the David Burley Health Sciences Center across the road, and we're being asked to pay extraordinary fees to use that. Notwithstanding the fact that we didn't have the foresight to put that in the agreements, can someone just call these folks and be like, hey, can we just use this? Can the city council use, that's the piece missing from this report. So I want to know, where are we with that bit of it? And if it has to come back in the future, cool. But I really, really want to be able to know how we can access these sites, and not just parochially from my office, but I want us to have that public conversation. We've invested millions and millions of dollars in these sites, and we're being told if you want access to them, you have to pay for them. And that to me seems ludicrous.
Thank you, Councillor. Steve, please.
Through the chair to the councillor, great point. In terms of our discussion with staff and some of these civic partners, those discussions were initiated in terms of understanding what the obligations were from an agreement perspective. Mainly the individuals that were discussed with our staff did not have the understanding of any agreement obligations that allowed the city to have a break or a discount, or to use city access or have city allocated access to these facilities. So I think that is a gap that we do have to improve upon in the future in terms of when we're going into these negotiations, to have standardized opportunities for these access points. But our staff did reach out to some of these civic partners to have those specific conversations in the limited time that we did have, knowing going into some of the vacation periods. But we can certainly continue to follow up with some of these civic partners and some of these other opportunities that we did not have a chance to touch base with in terms of getting answers from those organizations.
Councillor Kretsch, you have 25 seconds left.
Thank you. In those 25 seconds, okay, so what do I do next, right? Like I want to move this issue forward. And some of these things are assets we actually own, regardless of whether they're managed by somebody else. So I'm just trying to figure out what I do to move this situation forward. I don't want to rely on, frankly, the goodwill of other people to make this happen. So what do you need from me?
Thank you. Chris Hurstick, please.
Through the chair, Chris Hurstick, Acting General Manager, Community Services. Councillor, I think we can take direction that you would like us to come back and identify locations free of charge to have access within the downtown core, not only city facilities, but also our partner facilities for city activities. If that's the direction you'd like us to take, we would report back on that.
Yeah, whenever it's
Go ahead.
appropriate to move that motion, I can. Should I do it now or later?
Let me come back to you.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye for now.
Okay. Next speaker is Councillor Wang, please.
Thank you. Chair, I just want to be further clarified or crystal clear on this. The buildings that are in Appendix A are all technically up to building code today. These are just the additional costs of AODA upgrades. I just want to get that clarification.
Thank you. I think that would go to Robin.
Through the chair to the councillor, that's correct.
Okay. So is there an opportunity through you, Chair, just to get a further breakdown as to what is needed within each of these community centers? Or I do see being in a bunch of these, I don't exactly know what the AODA upgrades, what the individual buildings would potentially need. So is there an idea and a further breakdown and a cost associated? Like, do you have like a spreadsheet that kind of speaks about these are all the aggregated costs?
Robin, please.
Through the chair, we have a bit of a breakdown at our end, and we do regular auditing, accessibility auditing of the facilities to make sure that we're up to date with the accessibility features. When it comes to buildings that require a bit more of an extensive renovation, you'll see some of the higher dollar values on there listed for certain facilities. For those facilities, we would go through more of a renovation process for capital, where we would want to do a bit of a design and costing prior to really nailing down a very specific cost. But that having been said, we do have a bit of a breakdown of some of the features that are would be required in order to make the facility more accessible.
Councillor.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I think where I'm trying to go with this is that I think that there's two scenarios that I would really like to understand a little bit better. What are our bare basic minimums in order to get us to AODA compliant, and what is the wish list there, versus what does a full renovation rehab look like to make us the best of the best in terms of the AODA compliant recreation centers, because those will have likely two very different price tags. And also, as much as our council colleagues have already identified, this does need to go to the budget process, but there may be opportunities within my ward budget that I can do something to get us up to AODA compliant in a much faster way. So I'd like to understand these two paths to potentially move forward. And Chair, I'm not sure if that requires an offline conversation or should that be in open public. So I'm just trying to understand what my next steps would be asking for that type of information.
I think if you're wanting to bring back a motion to address it, it would be helpful to have an offline conversation to very clearly articulate exactly what needs to be done.
Right.
The other alternative would be to move a motion to have them report back to us with that list in the manner that you're speaking.
I think that what I'll do is I'll take this offline and I'll ask, I'll try and connect with Manager Ellis and trying to figure out what the right path forward is. Thank you very much, Chair.
Good idea. Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you. So appreciative of the very high-level conversation from the past three speakers. That's not where I'm going, unfortunately. So apologies, Councillor Maureen Wilson, if you're going to go back to the high level. I'm going to drag us into the weeds for a bit. What does an accessible staff entrance mean? Are we just looking at the AODA benchmarks, for example, and saying it has a push button, it's the right width, it goes there, or do we go further and do we think about what accessibility means beyond AODA standards? And I bring this up, for example, because within the standards is no thing that says there must be a staff access key, because that's about the door locking or not locking. And so we've just bumped into this scenario in non-rec facilities where there is technically an accessible entrance and staff could use it, but there's no key card, there's no way to unlock the door. And so it's functionally not an access that is accessible for staff members. And so we've had that just in some of other facilities, and I'm wondering, it's prompted a question about what does that accessibility auditing process look like? Is it based purely on AODA, or do we think about our use, think about our staff, and add to that AODA benchmarks as well? Just given that example there, I think points out what that difference could be.
Thank you, Councillor. Steve, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, I can start, and perhaps our colleagues from Public Works can add to that. But Councillor, you're correct in terms of different benchmarks and understanding what those actually means. I think there's an opportunity in all instances to improve what those benchmarks are. Those benchmarks are really related from the provincial standards, but there are opportunities to increase it based on our specific needs, site needs, and also programming needs as well. And I don't know if Robin has anything to add to that as well.
Robin, do you have anything to add?
Through the chair, just that when we are building new, which is a good best practice and a good model as a comparator at least, we look at use and we look at allowing everybody the opportunity to utilize the same entrance. And we look at inclusion in design, and especially when it comes to a new build, you have a bit of a blank slate. And when it comes to an existing facility, sometimes there's challenges presented, and it's a bit of problem solving to come up with the best possible solution. And sometimes budgets are also involved. So you have the ideal, and then you have what we can do in a given situation and budget, and happy to look at any specific situation and see what we can do to improve it. And we're working with existing buildings. So that was just the point that I was going to add. Hope it's helpful.
Councillor?
Thank you. It is helpful, and for some clarity or some context, I'm very much familiar with how standard development works. I've been on a standard development committee for an AODA standard at the provincial level. That bit I am clear on. I guess what my question is when we do our matrix, when someone's going by and doing the assessment, are they just printing out that provincial standard, or do we have a list that makes sense in rec? And happy to kind of maybe pursue it. Like, I'm hearing the best way to do that is to take it offline and follow up on specific concerns. Hearing that's been the answer from other folks. So I think maybe what I'm noticing is lots of us as council are interested in accessibility conversations, and it's really exciting that this is happening. Now, I do that, so happy to kind of leave that there with my question. I think I do just want to add that, just from quoting from the Recreation Master Plan, if I can read one sentence from that chair. For just recreation facilities, the amount of deferred maintenance has increased by more than fourfold since 2008, from 20.4 million to 89.8 million. Among many reasons for this is that the city's capital maintenance budgets have been frozen or reduced during this time. As maintenance budgets lag, facilities become tired and out of date, making it increasingly difficult to offer quality parks and recreation experiences. I'd add accessible ones as well.
Thank you, Councillor. The Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you. Most of my comments and questions have been asked, and I actually really appreciated Councillor Alex Wilson going into the weeds, because that's where I was going to go, not as eloquent as they were in terms of what does accessibility audit look like in the city of Hamilton. So I do think there will be a number of us, Chair, who will be conversing about this further. Because I think it is, we had a, Chair, as you know, we had a report earlier today at AFNA that was deferred because of just the magnitude of our agenda. But in that, it did highlight some deficiencies in the application of equity in our corporate practice, in our corporate policy, in our corporate budgeting. And we've also had some discussions as early as yesterday about asset management plans and the need to thread in equity as a guiding principle. And I think we're seeing these things gradually come bubbling to the surface in terms of what it looks like, and what maybe our promise and path forward could look like. I just therefore have a single question, in that Ms. Ellis identified the Ontario Building Code, AODA, and human rights. Is there any vulnerability for the municipality chair on that third pillar of human rights, within a legal framework in terms of accessibility and the others, that we may be vulnerable from a challenge on that front? Thank you.
Thank you. Robin, please.
Through the chair, in conversations with my colleagues in legal services and HR on a couple of instances, what essentially the path that we have followed, I can speak to the path that we followed, and the path that we followed is whenever we, for the most part, whenever we receive a request to accommodate accessibility for use, which can be fairly individualized, we as a city have an obligation to do so. And we work with the member of the public, we work with, our colleagues, and we make sure that we prioritize that very highly. So I have not run into a situation where we've run into a legal exposure that way. But I think it's possibly relating back to the approach that we take, which is that we work with the individual, we work to accommodate as best we can. And I think that the city would have a very hard time showing undue hardship, as one of the only caveats to being able to accommodate accessibility within a public facility. So we do hear those and we do accommodate them, and we've done a couple of renovations in that regard. And I think that that's the approach and the path that has been successful, and we should continue with. If we can fund these things proactively, then potentially that's even better. But as far as being responsive to the need, I think that that's an important piece as well, from my experience.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. So if I've heard correctly, when we are in receipt of, say, a complaint, we work expeditiously to come up with an accommodation, but that's complaint driven and site specific. It's not corporate, if I've understood Robin correctly.
Through the chair, that's correct. And I think that there's opportunity in this area. And I think the councillor is making some great points about, in making some investments in that regard, and how that can move the city forward in those areas.
Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the report. It's provoked, I think, some good questions, some valuable commentary, and I think also heightened a sense of responsibility for us moving forward on planning and budgeting and a whole bunch of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Wang, if you could take the chair for a moment, please.
Please go ahead.
So I've heard about the building code, AODA, and the human rights. Does the city review decisions that comes out of the commission in Toronto that, at least in my mind, and I'm assuming in many others, would set the standard in terms of what we need to do to ensure accessibility as a right?
Is that for Manager Ellis, please?
I'm not really sure. I think Manager Ellis mentioned the code. I'm trying to understand. Surely we're not simply sitting here waiting until there's a complaint and then we act on the matter. If we understand what's occurred in other municipalities and decisions, then one would assume that we would be proactively trying to rectify. And I'll leave it to anyone on the bench. I'm truly trying to understand this.
GM Herstick, please.
Through the chair, Councillor, we do review those items that come up in other municipalities. We try and make those changes as soon as possible as well. And I'll use the example of accessible or universal change rooms and washrooms as well. When that became an item many years ago, we continue to add those universal washrooms and change rooms within our facilities, usually during a major renovation.
And so we defer compliance until we have a major renovation, or do we act unilaterally once we're aware of a decision and clearly accessibility is the issue and here's how we fix it and we know how to fix it? Do we just move forward, or do we really wait until there's a renovation? Because candidly, it takes a long time to get these renovations. I've seen just in Stony Creek, a long time has occurred before we have made improvements to community centers. I look at Valley Park, and we just finally did it, and yet we knew a long time ago that there were issues. So I'm trying to understand how we prioritize.
Through the chair, we prioritize mainly with need, but by those major renovations. You can take through the list that's in Appendix A, we wouldn't be able to do all those renovations at once because all the facilities would be closed. So it is trying to prioritize and do as many as we can with the budgeted dollars that we have each year, knowing our block is not as large as we believe we would need to make all the renovations.
Thank you. That's helpful. Are there any further questions before I go to Councillor Kretsch for his motion? Okay, Councillor Kretsch, go ahead, sir.
Thanks, and I'm just going to hire it up here on my robot box. Just a moment while I grab it. Yeah, so it's very brief. It's just that city staff report back on the facilities, city-owned and otherwise, that can be used free of charge by the city for events, meetings, and activities in Ward 2. I was going to say the downtown core, but I think it does need to be a little more inclusive, and that sometimes gets to be muddy, so I mean in all of Ward 2, right from the escarpment to the bay. So that's it. I need a seconder.
And you need to second it. Councillor Alex Wilson, you're good with that? Any discussion on the item? Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
I beg your pardon, Chair. I'm wondering if the councillor could read it again, because I thought there was already direction on the books to investigate this, and perhaps I'm not up to snuff.
There was, and this I think is the report back on that. So I don't think we got the extra piece that was talking about the actual charge. So I'm just putting further direction to get that piece to come back. I do believe it was part of my original motion.
Yeah, it was. Okay, thank you.
I don't think it came back, which is fine, and that's my understanding. And so staff have said, hey, could I just go again? So here I am again.
Any comments on it? Thank you. Vice Chair, if you could take the chair for a second.
Go ahead.
I'm curious to the other councillors around the room, are you paying for facilities to hold public meetings and hold civic? Yeah, I am too, and it's very frustrating because frequently the community center, I simply can't book it because it's just so busy, so we have to find local churches that are willing to rent out their facility. So I think it's helpful to have that on the floor, Councillor, in the manner that you've put it forward, because it does open that discussion. And I think at some point we may want to talk about a civic engagement budget that's available to all councillors. Because if you start having a lot of civic engagement with regards to, I think of some of the larger developments that are coming into my ward and a meeting with residents on it and having town halls and things along that nature, it gets pretty expensive very fast. I'm not suggesting an amendment to your motion. I think we should start with your motion and find out, and then let's look at how we can make that equal for others who are equally struggling. It's very expensive these days. I'll take the chair back. Thank you. Okay, any further comments on the good councillor's motion? I think it's ready to roll. Let's have the vote then, please.
Vote is open.
Thank you. And that carried unanimously. So I need did I get a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation or the report? Councillor Nan, did you have another question? You'd like to move it? Thank you. And I need a seconder. Councillor Alex Wilson will second it. And we'll call that vote, please.
Vote is open.
Thank you. And that vote carried unanimously as well. Moving right along, we're now dealing with discussion items, which is item 11. 11.1 is the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee budget. I need a mover and a seconder to put the recommendation on the floor. Moved by Councillor Cretch, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. Are there any questions regarding the submission? Seeing none, we'll call the vote, please.
Vote is open.
Thank you. And that vote carried unanimously, 5-0. Excuse me. 11.2 is the 2024 budget submission for the Seniors Advisory Committee. I need a mover and a seconder to put the recommendations on the floor. Moved by Councillor Cretch, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. Are there any questions regarding this submission? Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
I do have a question, not regarding the submission. At the end of budget submissions for advisory committees, would you be able to come back to me, Chair? It was on the first one, but it didn't affect my vote. I just didn't get my hand up in time. So we don't need to recall a vote or anything. Not on this item, but flagging.
I understand. I will come back to you. Seeing no further questions on the submission, let's have that vote, please.
Vote is open.
Councillor Wang is a thumbs up on 11.2, please.
Oh, wrong one. Sorry, give me one moment, please.
That vote carries unanimously, 6-0 again. We're now moving on to item 11.3, which is the 2024 budget submission, LGBTQ Advisory Committee, HSC 23080. May I have a mover and a second to put the recommendations on the floor? Moved by Councillor Cretch, seconded by Councillor Wang. Are there any questions on the budget submission? Seeing none, we'll call the vote, please. That vote carried unanimously, 6-0. We're now moving on to 11.4, Macassa Lodge Redevelopment Project, HSC 20050, Ward 7. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the recommendations on the floor? Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Nan. Thank you. Are there any questions on this report? Councillor Wang, please.
No question to this report. I did want to read into the record that Councillor Jackson, who regrets not being here to speak for himself, is that he is in full support of this report. And having read the report and after information sharing discussion with Senior Administrator O'Dwardy, I believe it's critically important for committee to hopefully keep the conversation of the long-term care Macassa new and additional beds topic continuing, and to allow time to seek additional sources of external funding by approving the staff recommendations. And I can go on to read into the record.
Yes.
His email says that, and in light of the recent sad, unfortunate announcement of the Dundas Blackadar LTC facility closure, the proposed new D wing at Macassa, retaining the current 44 beds and adding to it 20 new beds, is more vital and salient than ever before. So I think that Councillor Jackson is in support.
I would say that's a safe bet, yes. Vice Chair, if you could take the chair for a second.
Please, go ahead.
It's ancillary to this matter, but will we be getting some type of report with regards to the impacts of that loss of that long-term care? I'm assuming we're going to have some challenges with transfers and things along that line.
Through the chair, Holly O'Dwardy, Senior Administrator, Long-Term Care Division. We can come back with a report to share the number of beds that are within the Hamilton 27 long-term care homes and what's happening with development and redevelopment at a future date, if that's helpful.
I think that is very much helpful, though. Thank you very much for that, Holly. Thank you, Vice Chair. Seeing Councillor Pauls. Now I come to you.
I was waiting all day for this. I just want to, first of all, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come and to sit on your meetings. And I just wanted to, Councillor Jackson has always supported the Macassa Lodge. It was in Ward 6, but it's in Ward 7 now. And he's looking like a mother that won't let go of her babies, because he's always supporting, and I am too. But because it's in my ward, I wanted to just say a few things. First of all, I wanted to thank Director Holly and her whole team for the unwavering support to our long-term care residents, and that the care they provide from the most vulnerable people. And of course, you heard about the other place, Blackadar, that's closing, and I think there was 54 beds. So it's very important that we pass this along. But I was going to ask the director if she, in a high-level summary, take us right to the beginning of this project and how we got here and how to move on, so that we're all clear, especially for the new councillors, because of the ask. And I know my colleague will support it, but I just wonder if you could take us high level. How did it begin, where we are, and where we're going?
Holly, would you like to provide us a précis of where we are and where we were and where we're going?
Through the chair to Councillor Pauls. So we started this journey back in 2017, discussing that D-Wing was built in 1954 with renovations in 1988. And the acuity and change in our resident population, design standards changing effective 2015, we were needing to make changes to this particular resident home area. There was conversations through development charges in support of this work. And in 2019, we began our journey on a feasibility study to do a review to determine what the design should be and estimate of costs. So that was completed in 2019 and 2020. Fast forward to today, we're here with a report bringing forward recommendations to support the journey to go forward to support the redevelopment. The recommendations are identifying that a development agreement has not been completed as of yet. There is still some work to be completed to actually sign off on that. We're sharing that the cost estimate, projected estimate, has increased approximately $22.3 million through that Class C costing. we're suggesting that the construction management process continue to be able to have the work done, to complete the development agreement through the costing analysis, and allowing our general manager to be able to complete any documents, ancillary documents for the construction management project for this project to continue.
Thank you. Councillor?
Yeah, thank you for that. And so we know how important it is, especially when I heard, I think it's 54 beds that in 2024 they're closing Blackadar. And it's so important for us to move on. And I know that the colleagues also will support this. And I want to thank you again because I know that our two facility, long-term care facility in Hamilton, are one of the best in Hamilton, and I probably could say in Ontario. I know we have a waiting list, people need it, and so again, I want to say thank you for bringing this to our attention, and hope we'll move forward on this. Thank you, Holly, and the team.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
I'll be really quick, super supportive of this. We've just been talking a lot about Blackadder, and I think we gotta talk about the quality of our beds and not just the number of our beds, and that's why I'm so supportive of the work that's going on at both Wentworth Lodge and here at Macassa Lodge and our public long-term care homes. Blackadder was managed by Extendicare, one of Canada's largest for-profit nursing home chains, filled multiple expansions, had multiple investigations from long-term care, having big violations, multiple fines, losing power for up to 13 hours in December means homes aren't heated in the winter. Seniors weren't getting wound care on a yearly basis. Like, it is sad whenever we lose beds. But I need all of us around this committee to hold a private long-term care bed and a public long-term care bed differently, because that's what we're funding here is also excellence in care, not just a bed. I don't think anyone was saying anything contrary to that, but I want to make that point really clear. It's, to me, and I think to all of us, it's about more than just the number of beds, but the quality of care that comes with these homes as well. So thank you.
That's well said, Councillor. We're all very proud of our long-term care facilities, and you can very clearly see the difference when you look at what we've been doing as a municipality. So thank you for raising that point. Any further questions or comments on this matter? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if we can call the vote, please. Thank you. We're now moving on to, after I announce it's carried 6-0. We're now moving on to 11.5, the Future Health Services, Inc. Single source HSC 23064 citywide. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the recommendations on the floor. Moved by Councillor Kretsch, seconded by Councillor Wang. Are there any questions or comments on the report? Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. If you could indulge me, if I could ask Chief Sanderson to give a brief overview with a particular focus on why a single source. I just want to make sure my questions are in order. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Chief?
Through Mr. Chair, Mike Sanderson, Chief Hamilton Paramedic Service. Councillor Wilson, as background to it, our goal here is to resolve procurement issues that have resulted in Policy 11 and Policy 19 earlier this year. And in the background for it, we started working with Future Health as part of the Canada Health InfoWaste process back in 2015. That was really a research project and was funded through grant money in the activities. And there was about 40 patients or 40 clients that were involved in at that point in time. The paramedics have set up the equipment provided by Canada Health InfoWaste and provided by Future Health, set up for each individual client. They monitor the equipment, they monitor the vital signs. As the alerts are coming into the central reporting station, they would end up doing an evaluation, respond to the clients, with the goal really of trying to keep the clients at home. And of course, the research showed very good levels of success in that. It kept patients at home instead of going into the hospital, really triggering the response. In 2019, as that funding ended and as we're going forward in the procurement process and starting to go into it, the funding was moved over to the Community Paramedicine Long-Term Care Program. Has been fully funded through CPLTC since that time period. And we have confirmed with CPLTC that the equipment that we're using is quite appropriate and adequate for their response activities. As we expanded during the COVID time period, COVID really took away a lot of our time periods in which we could do procurement. A lot of activities were really accelerated. And of course, the utilization of remote patient monitoring accelerated through COVID as well. Again, the funding came through not just from Community Paramedicine Long-Term Care, but additional grant funding from Ontario Health as well, really focusing on chronic conditions. Going to your point, Councillor, as to why we would recommend a single source in the process, we now have about 225 clients that are utilizing the equipment. We have 16 community paramedics that are trained in utilizing it, plus backups in the process. The time period in which to change out all of the equipment, to retrain our paramedics, to retrain the clients, really becomes a bit problematic in the process for us in terms of diverting our energies away from doing those activities. We recognize there are other devices. 60% of the paramedic services in the province that are using remote patient monitoring are currently using the same devices that we're using, so it's a very consistent process on a provincial level. In terms of the actual utilization for it, I can tell you that in the last 12 months, we've had 7,598 alerts come to us through the remote patient monitoring program. And out of those 7,598 alerts, only 17 resulted in a 911 transport to hospital. 3,300 resulted in home phone visits, and another 244 actually resulted in the paramedic going to the home and doing an assessment at the home as well. So our goal is to avoid 911 response. Our goal in terms of sole sourcing is to make sure that we don't end up diverting our paramedic resources away from actually servicing the clients, because we already have all of this equipment in the homes. Our paramedics and everybody's trained in that activity. And I think as an addition to that, it links in already through the existing programs that we've developed into our patient care reporting activities and our patient care records. So it is an integral part, and it would be a significant change. We'd have to change some of those activities as well to move away from the platform. Not to take away from any of the other platforms that are being used. This is actually the one that we have been using for 8 years now, and it works extremely well for us. In terms of technical questions, if there's technical questions about the equipment, I've also brought Deputy Chief Crocker with me as well. He's more familiar with the day-to-day operational issues. So that would be my quick summary, Councillor Wilson.
Councillor? I'm sorry, Councillor, you're muted.
Thank you. The nature of my questions, Chief, and to my colleagues and to anybody else who's watching them is not at all I have nothing but praise about these this mobile equipment from personal experience in our family. They are a wonder. They're easy to use and they make a whole bunch of sense. The root of my questions, however, is let me begin first of all with the first one. Are you able to tell me whether Future Health Services Inc. is still a not-for-profit? Through the chair.
Thank you. Chief?
We would have to, through you, Mr. Chair, we would have to review that to find out whether they are a not-for-profit. I believe they were a full not-for-profit organization when they first started under Canada Health InfoWays. I would have to go back to that and determine that for you, Councillor. I'm not positive on that.
Councillor?
Thank you. Here is my expressed worry, Chief, and to my colleagues. I'm not going to dispute this direction. It's largely operational, but I will disclose the pattern that normally happens is in small tech startup often begins in partnership with an academic institution as a not-for-profit, and then inadvertently they end up making a market for themselves and crowding out further innovation. And I think innovation in service to patients and all residents is key. It's key to health outcomes. It's key to competitiveness for those entities like municipalities who have to buy them. And it just creates a culture of employment and innovation and research across Canada, which we need. So therein lies my hesitancy, Chair. We've seen this. You and I have served on other committees where somebody gets to a certain size and then their competitors are crowded out and we're forced into single sources because there's no one else doing the work. So therein lies my reservation. I'll vote for it, but I just wanted to put that flag up the pole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Wang, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I was in and along the same lines as Councillor Wilson because as much as this is a business that has been going on for 8 years, I wanted to understand what was the switching costs or what were some of the opportunities for other players to come in and potentially deliver other programs or other innovations that might build out more of a robustness in patient monitoring. So I think, Chair, most of my questions have been asked and answered. I am also in support of this because we definitely need this in our community, but it's one of those cautionary tales where I'd really like to also explore what is the opportunity for switching. Could we potentially look at growing patient monitoring? Could we look at expanding the patient pool beyond 200? What does scalability look like? So those are sort of my questions that I think don't necessarily require an answer today, but it's one of those that to place a bug in Chief's ear and Deputy Chief's ear about how do we look at this from a scaling perspective and how do we build this beyond, and is First Health the right vendor to continue helping us with that?
Thank you. I'll still go to the Chief. Chief, comments, please.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for that, Councillor Wang. And as you're probably aware from the report, there are actually 3 competitors in the process: Atonix, Philips Virtual Care Management, and Vivify Health, all of them relatively large organizations as well. We will certainly take that under advisement. We've been trying to keep on top of what the opportunities are. We did expand very quickly during COVID in the process to move from 40 to 225. The mobile integrated health team is going to continue to look at that. So we will definitely have that in our mind about how we can expand, certainly expand within the funding envelopes that are available to us, because that is funded provincially on a 100% funding basis. So if we're going to go to a larger number, unless the cost per client goes down as a result of scope, we would still have to end up dealing with the issues of where do we find the cash to do that.
Councillor Wang.
Thank you for that answer, Chief, and through you, Chair. I think absolutely funding is always going to be one of the key drivers here. I also believe that we have other orders of government that are placing a significant amount of resources into innovation and building up the innovation ecosystem. So many times I have heard that there are opportunities for go-to-market. So many orders of government will invest in startup companies in order for them to have additional pilot programs with the City of Hamilton or with a potential like partner like us as an institution. So I am interested in taking this information, this conversation offline, and then maybe we can potentially look at seeing how we can leverage innovation dollars from other orders of government to help with building out the scalability here. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll leave it to you to reach out to the Chief. Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll have the vote on the item, please.
Vote is open.
Thank you.
Unanimous.
That vote carried unanimously, 6-0. We are now moving on to 11.6, which is the Paramedic Service Student Practicum Placement Agreements, HSC 23079. May I have a move and a second to put the recommendations on the floor, please? Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. Are there any questions regarding the report? Not seeing any. I will call the vote, please.
Vote is open.
And that vote carried 6-0. I promised to go back to Councillor Alex Wilson after 11.6, so I'll go to him now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question about the future of 11.1 as a result of our mandate shift at committee. Not anything about 11.1 today, but in next year, when the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee submits a budget, do we have to do some process clerical housekeeping work to have them change to report back to GIC if that's where we want them, if that's where all housing stuff is going, or will they continue to report to ECS and we're okay with that? We've recently moved all housing stuff over, and so this is probably here because it's a different mechanism than the rest of the housing stuff, but just that's the question to you, Chair, and if any changes need to be made to realize the intention of that motion.
Thank you very much. That would go to Grace Mader.
Good afternoon, Grace Mader, General Manager, Healthy and Safe Communities. That's an excellent point, Councillor Wilson, and it is a bit of a hangover that we will need to do a little bit of cleanup on. So we'd appreciate that if a motion is willing, we could do that and process it. You know, we've got a little lead time till the next time, but yeah, it is a cleanup item for sure. Thanks.
Councillor?
Yeah, that was it. I assume that we'll have to do something with our where do standing committees report to, and I very much trust the general manager and the clerk's team to figure out what those I's that need to be dotted, T's crossed look like.
I think everyone heard you. Okay, Councillor Wang, if you'd like to take the floor. We're now into motions. I spoke earlier, Clerk and Holly, with regards to a report back on the number of long-term care beds, the number of long-term care beds that we have lost, some type of information report that would come to us, the impacts of the loss of Blackadder or Blackadder, I'm not sure which it is. And is there any opportunity there for the city to look at perhaps another municipal long-term care facility? We know the demand is there. We know the province is looking for it. So I think if we ask staff to look at it and come back to us, then we can make some decisions. Does that make sense?
Through the chair, happy to do that.
Okay, do you have a seconder?
Anybody wishing to second that?
I am happy to second that. Then.
Thank you.
Okay.
And did the clerk capture it all, Vice Chair?
We're just waiting, just for the public, just so that they know, we're just buying a little bit of extra time for the clerk. There we go. So it sounds, so I can read out the motion that staff be directed to report back to ECS with the number of beds lost with the closure of long-term care homes in the city.
And the only thing I would add to that, any opportunities that we may have as a result of the closure of Blackadder.
Okay. Is there a time frame here? Do we need to have a time frame?
I will speak to it. I think time is of the essence with regards to Blackadder. I think the province of Ontario is struggling, trying to figure out how they're going to deal with the loss of those beds, not just the public relations fallout that it caused. Would it be reasonable to get a report back in the first quarter?
Through the chair, Blackadar will be closing April 2024, and so we can for sure have a report back Q1 for you.
Okay. Can we do that, Vice Chair?
Okay. Clerk, is that perfect? Great. Q1 2024? Because, yeah, perfect. So motion as it reads is staff be directed to report back in Q1 2024 to ECS with the number of beds lost with the closure of long-term care homes in the city and include any opportunities that might be available with the closure of Blackadder LTC. All right, and any questions, comments? Councillor Maureen Wilson, please. Then followed by Councillor Nan.
Thank you. I'm just showing my ignorance. I know the Municipal Act requires municipalities of certain size to provide at least one long-term care home. We've got 2. And so if I'm understanding the motion, I guess I'm just trying to understand the specific reference to a particular facility. We're asking for a report back on the number of beds lost since when? I'm sorry, Acting Chair, could you remind me what the motion says?
So the motion says is the amount of lost beds on the closure of Blackadder LTC. We heard from Senior Administrator Edwardi that it is set to be closed April 2024. So I think to the movers, to the motion, it is speaking to the lost beds and whether there's opportunity with making those adjustments. But perhaps I'll ask Councillor Clark to clarify if there's anything else that I might have missed.
No, you have it. Councillor Wilson is correct that the Act says that we have to have a long-term care facility. We have operated 2 for quite some time. The closure of Blackadder is going to be an issue with the loss of those beds. I'm aware that the province is wrestling with it, and I know other long-term care facilities are trying to assist wherever they can, but there's still going to be a shortage of beds. And I'd just like our staff to look at it and see if there's anything that the city can do to ensure that we don't find ourselves in a situation where the patients in that long-term care facility at the end of April are simply told, okay, we're closing, good luck. And that's my concern.
Councillor Wilson, does that kind of answer your question?
I have an additional question, Acting Chair, please, to staff.
Sure. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Again, begging forgiveness if this has been reported, but through you, Acting Chair, to staff, are we in receipt of a report this term showing us, for lack of a better word, the lay of the land when it comes to the number of long-term care beds? Like, is there a market shrinkage going on in terms of the sale of these facilities as a consequence of they're able to enjoy, say, a sale due to the value of land? Like, I'm just looking for if we've kind of had that profile, that activity profile that is not specific to one, but more specific generally to assist in any sort of an analysis. Thank you.
I'm looking to the bench.
Through the chair, we do not have that information.
Okay. Councillor?
Thank you. So I agree with Councillor Clark in that try not to be political. I think this government, as a consequence of COVID and the evidence that came from study, knows it has some significant vulnerability with respect to care, long-term care, and we're all aging. And I think the pandemic showed a gross number of vulnerabilities and risks. And I guess I don't have any issue with the motion per se. However, if this is a province in search of a solution or something that we could lead them to in whole or in part or even in fraction, I would be interested in having sort of a larger overview of the status to date and what trends we're seeing, and maybe that might reveal some opportunities to be had in our advocacy. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I recognize Councillor Nan, please.
Thank you. Through you, Vice Chair. No opposition to the motion that's here. Similarly, just wondering about more of the holistic scan and wondering if would it be within the purview of this committee or perhaps jointly with public health? I'm not certain, but I would perhaps like to seek some clarity on that. I don't see the situation that the private long-term care market is facing to be too dissimilar from residential care facilities and privately operating retirement facilities as well, which I know that we have now lost 2 residential facilities, retirement facilities in Ward 3. And a couple of years back, there was also a particular private provider of residential care facilities that that was found to be, well, anyway, who had to offload their properties. I'll just leave it at that. So wondering, through you, Vice Chair, where would be an appropriate place for this more holistic conversation?
That is an excellent question. I'm going to look at GM Herstick.
Through the chair, I would suggest that we connect with the public health folks, and maybe we could bring that as part of a portion of the report back, information report back.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. Is there anything that staff need from this committee in order to enable that work?
Through the chair, I believe we have the direction.
Vice Chair, I do want to just remain our consistency in this term of council that if there's good conversation collaboratively happening between committee members and staff understanding the questions very clearly, that we do document any further direction so that it makes it into the OBL.
So let's pull up the existing language. So after the,
So, Vice Chair, I think I can assist a little bit. So in the conversation that we had earlier, prior to me moving the motion, Holly did indicate that she could give us a more holistic look at what's transpiring in the city. We have lost retirement residential care facilities. We had some issues with long-term care facilities over in the far end of Stony Creek. So having that picture, and Councillor Nan is correct, the motion doesn't articulate that directly, but we would like to see that more holistic report. I'm just personally, and I think all of my colleagues are in the same boat. We see these changes, and if there isn't a place for the residents to go, the fear is that they just end up on the street. And many of these residents have struggling acuities of care that need to be handled by healthcare. And I think it behooves this municipality, as Councillor Nan has indicated, let's get the holistic look at the situation when it comes to long-term care beds. I'm not seeing any announcements about new long-term care facilities being approved. So what are we going to do? And I think that's the essence of it, and I probably didn't articulate it that well.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that helps, Councillor Nan.
If I can, Vice Chair, then perhaps some language clarity. And Councillor Clark, if you wanted something specific regarding LCs, just let me know. But I could propose that staff from, as it's mentioned on the screen here, both Healthy and Safe Communities and Public Health be directed to report back in Q1 of 2024 to ECS with a holistic review.
Yep.
Or a holistic overview, perhaps. And here's where I'll need some support. Holistic overview on the closure of long-term care
Sector in Hamilton.
Does the sector include residential care facilities and retirement facilities? If not, then we can name them explicitly as well.
We're looking to staff, Councillor. Give us a
GM
second.
Mater, please.
Good afternoon. Through the chair to the councillor, I would suggest we avoid the residential care facilities within that grouping.
Okay. Councillor Nan, is that okay with you?
So long-term care sector, okay.
And then excluding the residential care facilities. Yep.
If I could, through you, Vice Chair, if GM Mater could just shed a little more light on that.
Through the chair, they're providing a different service as opposed to retirement and long-term care. It's a different segment of the population. We could bring back some information regarding residential care facilities, but it would not be under the same umbrella as long-term care and retirement.
Recognizing that, Vice Chair, just conscious of the fact that there are seniors living in residential care facilities who do not have access financially to get into retirement facilities, is my understanding by some of the residents I've been meeting with and discussing their circumstances. So I'm happy to take staff's advice on this, but I just wanted to flag that.
Thank you for the flag. All right, sorry. Okay, yes. But could you just pull up the motion again?
So
just
may
that
I,
we can-
may I ask, Vice Chair, is it necessary to indicate excluding the residential care facilities? We can get a report back on the challenge with residential care facility is a completely different funding model. And there's an agreement with the municipality, whereas long-term care facilities have funding models from the province of Ontario and standards from the province of Ontario.
So I think the question is whether we still need to exclude that or continue to keep that language.
And that's what I'm asking our staff. Do we need to consciously indicate excluding residential care facilities and then come back with a separate review on that?
GM Mader, please.
Through the chair, you could categorize them as long-term care and congregate as a way of capturing what you're trying to get an information overview about.
So of the long-term care and congregate
Settings.
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 Okay. And then we can remove long-term care. Yep, perfect, residential. And then, so the current reading, and I'm also, I'm watching, thank you, Jessica, the WebEx here. So staff from both HSC and PHS be directed to report back in Q1 2024 to ECS with a holistic overview of the long-term care and congregate settings in Hamilton, with the number of beds lost and the closure of long-term care homes in the city, and include any opportunities that might be available with the closure of Blackadder LTC. I've read that into the record. Let's pull that down so we can take a look at the rest of our colleagues. And Councillor Nan, does that satisfy the wording for you? Okay. I recognize Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
I'd like to cede the floor to Councillor Alex Wilson because I think they were the first ones raising this issue. Thank you.
Wonderful. Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Sorry, is this, we're doing notices of motion or a motion? Like I want to take a step back, just high level, through you, Chair, to you. Staff direction, and this is relating to item 11.4 rather,
Yes.
the Macassa Lodge update and expansion, and that's why we're doing this today as opposed to a notice. I'm just trying to procedurally get oriented. Thank you. Okay. I think all we want is the number of beds at which facility and if there have been complaints. I think if we could do that and take that offline and bring it back at council, that's what it sounds like everyone wants. And it gets longer and longer and longer and harder and harder. I think that's really what folks are looking for is how many beds are at this facility? And as of the last inspection, what are the public record of complaints? Would those questions satisfy your intention in moving, Councillor Clark?
Councillor Clark.
My intention was that Blackadar is going to close in April. Those beds are going to be gone. Where are the residents going? And so this enables our staff to come back with a report on the overall sector. Perhaps other long-term care facilities are taking those residents in. We do not know. But we have a loss of beds that is going to impact a number of seniors who are in very vulnerable conditions in this municipality. And Holly wishes to comment.
Okay.
So through the chair, it's through the Hamilton Community Care Support Services where residents are placed into long-term care homes. So HCCSS is knowledgeable about the closure April 2024. Blackadar would not close their doors if residents are still not placed. They would remain in service until all residents from their home are decanted properly. The information that I just want to be clear about for the report is you want to have a better understanding of the number of beds available across our 27 long-term care homes here in Hamilton. You want to understand any development that is happening, any approved beds that are coming on service to better understand. There's approximately 1,800 person wait list in Hamilton for beds, and understanding the crisis number, which is anywhere between 300 to 400 at a time. So I understand that to be the data to be coming back for this report specific to long-term care to better understand where the gap is to help fill beds. Is that correct?
Yes.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I think if this is a high-level overview and we're scoping it like that, I mean, vice chair or acting chair, this is your decision and call. Great, let's move forward. Let's get it done, hopefully quickly. If this is about Blackadar closing, it's out of order. Like that just fundamentally to me, and we should stop and we should get that motion ready to go and then present that motion. I think trying to do two things here is a little separate, and there is a process that's provincial in terms of rehoming folks. There are requirements that are provincial in terms of rehoming folks. And then just to share, I thought this was broader knowledge, but I'll put it, like the Heritage Committee has been looking at this site because it's being redeveloped. The giant for-profit long-term care home developer has sold their asset to a giant real estate developer. I'm not sure what municipal opportunities exist unless we're talking about land acquisition. If we are, that's really, really exciting, but I don't think that's what we're talking about in this motion. So if it's just the review, let's move forward and let's keep it as a review. If we're talking about the Blackadar closure, Chair, I would suggest that might be out of order today, and I think having both in the motion is what's getting confusing.
I see. So thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. Should we pull up the motion again and remove the Blackadar?
I'm fine. Whatever the committee wants.
Okay.
The reality is we have 1,800 people who can't even get into a long-term care home. We have another facility closing. We need to understand what is happening in the city of Hamilton. And what can we do as a city of Hamilton to bring more beds online? However you word that, not sure it's out of order.
Okay.
But whatever this committee wants to do to get to that hub, I'm happy with.
Okay. Of potentially private LTCs. That way we're, yes, perfect. Okay, so the motion as it currently reads is staff from both Healthy and Safe Communities and Public Health be directed to report back in Q1 2024 to ECS, Emergency Community Services, with a holistic overview of the long-term care and congregate settings in Hamilton, with the number of beds lost and the closure of long-term care homes in the city, and include any opportunities that might be available with current closures of private LTC facilities. That is the current wording. Councillor M. Wilson, please. Nope. Yes?
Thank you. Nope.
Okay.
Thank you. Nope.
All right, so if committee is all right, I'd like to call that to question. We do have Councillor Clark moving and I'm seconding, so may I have the vote, please?
Vote is open. Councillor Nan?
And that carries 6-0. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Are there any further motions or notices of motion? Thank you. Any general information or other business? You have something, Councillor?
No.
No? This is my last meeting as chair of ECS. I want to thank all of the staff for working with me. It was very enlightening. I think we got a lot accomplished this year. I enjoy working with this committee. We have an opportunity in this committee to really help some of the most vulnerable people in our community, and the colleagues around this table have taken that role very seriously and have tackled items head on. So thank you to all of my colleagues for all of their hard work and initiatives, and I look forward to what happens next year without me in the chair. Thank you very much. I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn. Councillor Kretsch, his hand went up before he even said the word adjourn. Seconder, Councillor Wang. That was fast, Councillor. And thank you also to the clerks. Without them, we would look very bad. They really do help us keep things moving forward. So thank you very much for all of your hard work.
Thank you, Councillor, for your leadership on this.
And that carries 6-0.